The night of my father's retirement party was supposed to be special, a milestone, a celebration of decades of his dedication and sacrifices. I had pictured it for weeks, me walking into the hall, smiling, maybe even tearing up as I handed him the small gift I'd bought with my modest savings. Something personal, something that would remind him that no matter what the rest of the family thought of me, I was still his daughter, still proud of him. But as I got dressed that evening, pulling on a simple dress and brushing my hair, I felt that familiar knot of anxiety in my stomach. My extended family had always treated me differently, like I was somehow less than the others. The odd one out. Too quiet. Too sensitive. Too different. At family gatherings, it was as if I wasn't even in the room, unless someone needed a punchline. Still, this night was about Dad. Surely they wouldn't ruin it. The hall was buzzing with chatter when I arrived. Tables were decorated in blue and gold. A banner stretched across the back wall that read, "Congratulations on your retirement, Daniel." Laughter echoed from every corner. I forced a smile as I walked in, clutching the wrapped box against my chest. I spotted my mother across the room. She gave me a small wave, the kind of wave that was polite but cautious, as if she already knew what was coming and didn't want to be caught in the middle. My heart sank a little, but I straightened my shoulders and told myself to ignore it. Tonight wasn't about me. It was about celebrating the man who had raised me, who had worked his hands to the bone so I could have a better life. I weaved through the tables, nodding at relatives who barely acknowledged me. Some offered half-hearted smiles. Others just looked past me as if I were invisible. It wasn't new. It was just exhausting. My palms were damp against the smooth paper of the gift box. And then it happened. I had almost reached the head table, where my father sat, chatting with an uncle, when my aunt's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "Why are you even here?" she said, loud enough for the entire table and several others to hear. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing as though she were genuinely confused by my presence. "This is for family only." For a moment, the world froze. Forks clinked against plates as people turned to stare. Then came the laughter-low chuckles from my cousins, a smirk from another aunt, even a few muffled laughs from people I didn't even know well. My face burned. My throat tightened. I felt the sting of tears pressing at the corners of my eyes, and I hated myself for it. I forced myself to glance at my dad, silently pleading with him to say something, anything, to remind them I was his daughter. But he didn't. His eyes dropped to his plate, his jaw tightening just slightly. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. The humiliation was complete. For a split second, I considered speaking up. My mind screamed to shout at them, to tell them exactly who I was and why I belonged here more than half the people in the room. But another part of me, a colder, sharper part, told me not to. They wanted me to snap. They wanted a scene. So I didn't give it to them. I simply nodded, my lips pressed together in a thin line. Slowly, I set the gift box down on the nearest table. I picked up my bag, turned, and walked toward the exit. My heels clicked against the polished floor, each step echoing in the stunned silence that followed me. No one stopped me. Not my mother, not my father, not a single cousin, aunt, or uncle. By the time I stepped out into the cool night air, my chest felt like it was on fire. Tears blurred my vision as I unlocked my car. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, my heart pounding like a drum. Her words replayed in my head over and over again. "Why are you even here?" And the silence from everyone else hurt even more than her cruelty. As I started the engine, I made myself a quiet promise. They thought I didn't belong? Fine. But soon they'd learn exactly how wrong they were. I don't even remember how I got home that night. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, and the road blurred in front of me as tears welled in my eyes. I wasn't sobbing. It wasn't the kind of crying that shook your chest. It was the quiet kind, the silent, burning tears that streamed down your face, no matter how many times you blinked them away. The humiliation replayed in my head like a broken record. My aunt's voice, sharp and cutting. "Why are you even here? This is for family only." And worse, the way the entire room laughed, not even nervous laughter. It was genuine, cruel amusement, like I was some kind of joke. But what gutted me most wasn't her words. It wasn't even the laughter. It was my father's silence. My father. The man who had taught me how to ride a bike, who had stayed up late helping me with math homework when I was 12, who had hugged me after my first heartbreak, the man whose retirement we were all supposedly there to celebrate. He had looked down at his plate, not a word in my defense, not even eye contact. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my chest felt like it was caving in. I shut off the engine, sat there in the dark, and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My mascara had smudged, my lipstick was faded, and my eyes looked hollow. I barely recognized myself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something, to let out the storm that was brewing inside of me. But instead, I sat there in silence, taking deep, shaky breaths. They thought they had broken me. Maybe once upon a time, they would have. Maybe the old me would have curled up in bed, let the humiliation eat me alive, and pretended it never happened. But not anymore. Something inside me shifted that night. A hard, cold determination I didn't even know I had. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to beg them for a place at the table, to be acknowledged, to be treated as family. If they couldn't see my worth, if they chose to erase me, then fine. But I wasn't going to sit back and let them erase the truth. Because here's the thing, families like mine, they like to paint a picture. To the outside world, they're perfect, respectable, a tight-knit, loving clan. But I knew the cracks in that picture. I knew the secrets whispered behind closed doors, the lies that kept everything glued together. And now, I was done keeping their secrets. I wiped my face with the back of my sleeve, took a long breath, and pulled out my phone. My finger hovered over the gallery. Years of photos, videos, messages, all the things I'd kept, quietly, silently, because I had always hoped I'd never need them. Evidence of the way they had treated me, of the ugly truth they worked so hard to hide from the world. As I scrolled, a bitter smile tugged at my lips. They thought they had humiliated me tonight. They thought I was powerless, that I would just walk away with my tail between my legs. But they had no idea what I held in my hands. By the time I walked into my house, I felt calmer. Not healed, no. The pain was still sharp but focused. I made tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control. They thought I didn't belong. They thought I wasn't family. Fine. But I was about to show them, and everyone else, just how wrong they were. And as I typed out my first message, a strange thought crossed my mind. Maybe this was the beginning, not the end. The morning after the retirement party, I woke up earlier than usual. My eyes still felt heavy from crying, but the fog that usually came with heartbreak wasn't there. Instead, there was clarity, a razor-sharp awareness of what needed to be done. I made myself coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop again. The cursor blinked at me on the blank screen, daring me to move forward. For years, I had swallowed their insults, their subtle jabs, their blatant dismissals, convincing myself that if I just kept the peace, one day they'd treat me differently. But last night had stripped away the last of my illusions. It wasn't about acceptance anymore. It was about truth. The first step was simple. Gather everything. I went through old text threads with my mother, screenshots of her accidental messages to my aunt, where she complained about me, calling me a burden, and too sensitive. I pulled up voicemails, yes, I had saved them, of my father choosing my brother over me for family events, saying things like, "You understand, right?" It's just easier this way. Shout. I scrolled through photos too, the ones that told stories they never thought anyone else would see. There was the Thanksgiving, where they had forgotten to set me a place at the table. The birthday dinner, where I'd sat in the corner, while the rest of them toasted to family unity. Even videos of my aunt, drunk at Christmas, slurring insults while everyone else laughed. Individually, they were small cuts. But together, they painted a picture of neglect, exclusion, cruelty, all behind the perfect facade they showed to the world. And I wasn't just going to keep these receipts for myself anymore. I created a private folder on my computer, labeling it simply Truth. As I dragged each file into it, my resolve grew stronger. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin. "Hey, sorry about last night. That was rough." I almost laughed. Rough? That was their word for it? Being told I didn't belong at my own father's retirement? Being laughed at like I was a stranger intruding on a private party? But I didn't respond. Not yet. Silence, I was learning, was its own kind of weapon. Instead, I opened my journal. Not the one with poetry and ramblings, but the one I'd kept hidden in my closet. The one where I'd written down every slight, every time they pushed me aside, every time I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. It was all there in my own handwriting, proof of years of being sidelined. As I flipped through the pages, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. How many others had they treated this way? How many other people had been excluded, humiliated, silenced, just so they could maintain their perfect image? My father might have been the man of the hour, but the truth was, he'd been complicit all along. His silence had always protected them. And last night, that silence had broken something in me for good. By the time the sun started to set, I had assembled a file that could crack their facade wide open. My hands trembled as I looked at the sheer weight of it all, but my heart was steady. I didn't know exactly how I would use it yet. Maybe a letter, maybe something more public. But one thing was certain. They weren't going to get away with pretending anymore. Not after what they did to me. As I closed the laptop, a single thought anchored me. This time, the silence would be theirs. The next morning, I woke up with an unusual calmness. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating quiet of being ignored. It was the kind of silence that comes before something big, something irreversible. For years, I had let my family dictate the script. They decided when I could speak, how much space I could take, and where I belonged. But now, for the first time, I was holding the pen. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat back at the kitchen table, laptop open to the truth folder I had created the night before. The files sat there like silent witnesses, each one a piece of the puzzle. Screenshots, recordings, journal entries, photos. Every item in that folder was a reminder that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't overreacting, and I wasn't too sensitive. I needed a way to make them see it too, or better yet, to make them unable to deny it. At first, I thought about posting everything online. A social media post, maybe a video, where I laid it all out. The humiliation, the neglect, the cruelty disguised as jokes. I imagined the shock on their faces as their carefully built reputation crumbled in front of their friends, neighbors, colleagues. For a moment, the thought was satisfying. But then I hesitated. Going public like that meant putting myself under a spotlight too, and I wasn't sure I wanted strangers dissecting my pain. No, I wanted something more precise. Something that would cut deep, but still leave me in control. That's when the idea of a letter came back to me. A letter could be powerful. It wasn't just words. It was tangible, undeniable. A letter could arrive in their mailbox, sit on their kitchen table, stare them in the face every morning until they finally understood. And unlike a public post, it was targeted, personal. I grabbed a notebook and started outlining what I would say. Not a rant, not a list of petty complaints, but the truth. The entire truth, laid out clearly, backed up by the evidence I had collected. I pictured their faces as they read it, my aunt's smirk fading, my mother's sharp tongue finally silenced, my father's eyes dropping with the weight of his complicity. But then another thought struck me. What if they ignored it? What if they laughed it off like they always did? That's when I decided the letter wouldn't just be for them. I pulled up my email and drafted a list of recipients. Extended family members, family friends, even my father's colleagues from work who had always believed we were the perfect family. If my parents wanted to play the game of appearances, then I was going to play too. Only this time, I would win. The letter wouldn't just go to them. It would go to everyone who mattered in their world. By mid-afternoon, I was already drafting the opening lines. For years, I've stayed silent. For years, I've been told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. But last week, at my own father's retirement party, I was told outright that I didn't belong in my own family. This is the truth you all don't see. The words poured out of me, faster than I could type. With every sentence, I felt lighter, stronger, freer. It was as though the years of silence had been a dam, and now the flood had finally broken through. Still, I knew this wasn't something I could rush. The timing had to be right. I needed to make sure that when they received it, there was no way to twist it, no way to turn the blame back on me like they always did, so I saved the draft and sat back, breathing deeply. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just reacting to them. I was planning, I was strategizing, and in that moment, I realized they had no idea what was coming. They thought pushing me aside at that retirement party was just another joke, just another reminder of where I stood. But soon, they would learn that their laughter had been the spark. The letter was coming, and with it, the truth. The following evening, after a long day of replaying every memory in my head, I finally sat down at my desk to write the letter. This wasn't just an emotional release anymore. It was my weapon, my shield, my declaration of independence from a family that had spent years cutting me down. I opened a blank document on my laptop and stared at the cursor blinking in the corner of the screen. It almost felt like it was daring me, taunting me. For a moment, I felt paralyzed. How do you summarize years of cruelty, neglect, and passive-aggressive digs into just a few pages? How do you take all of the invisible scars and turn them into something undeniable? I took a deep breath, opened my notebook, and began. The first line was clear in my head. To the family who always told me I was too sensitive, here is the truth. From there, the words began to pour out. I wrote about the retirement party, how my aunt had looked me in the eye and said I didn't belong, how everyone laughed, how my parents didn't defend me, didn't even hesitate to let me be humiliated in a room full of people. But I didn't stop there. I went deeper. I described the years of being pushed aside, being made the butt of jokes, being told I was dramatic whenever I stood up for myself. I reminded them of the Christmas my sister shoved me and broke my wrist, and how my mother's only response was, "You're always exaggerating." I brought up birthdays they forgot, conversations they twisted, moments when I was treated like an outsider in my own home. With every paragraph, I felt the tension in my chest loosen. It wasn't easy, it was painful to relive those moments, but it was also liberating. This wasn't just a list of grievances. This was evidence, proof, a record of what they had done, one they could no longer laugh away. After hours of writing, I leaned back in my chair and read it from the beginning. It was powerful, clear, unflinching. But something was missing. That's when I realized I needed to attach the evidence. So I went back into my truth folder. Screenshot by screenshot, I embedded the proof. The texts where my sister mocked me. The photo of me in the hospital with a cast on my wrist, standing next to my mother who looked bored and annoyed. The recording where my father called me an embarrassment during a family argument. I made sure it wasn't just my word against theirs. It was undeniable. By the time I finished formatting, the letter was no longer just a letter. It was a dossier. A mirror that reflected back the version of themselves they always tried to hide. But then came the hardest part, deciding who would receive it. I already knew it would go to my parents and my aunt, but the question was, who else? Should I send it to extended family? Should I include friends who always believed my parents' perfect family story? Should I forward it to my father's colleagues, the ones he always bragged to about his picture-perfect children? The idea of going that far made me hesitate. Did I really want to blow up their lives that completely? Or would sending it just to the family be enough? I sat there for a long time, weighing my options. Finally, I decided it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I wasn't doing this to destroy them. I was doing this to free myself. So I drafted 2 versions of the plan. The first, a direct letter to the family. The second, an expanded version, ready to send to others if they dismissed me again. By the time I was done, it was nearly 2 a.m. My eyes were heavy, but I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, I had control. The words were written, the evidence was collected, and the truth was ready. I closed the laptop and whispered to myself, tomorrow, the silence ends. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. My heart was already racing, as if my body knew today was different. I didn't even need coffee. The adrenaline alone was enough to jolt me awake. For a long moment, I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the sunlight creeping through the blinds. This was it. Today, I would send the letter. No more drafts, no more what-ifs, no more waiting for the right moment. The right moment was now. I made myself a cup of tea, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop. There it was, waiting for me. The document I had poured my soul into. The folder labeled Truth. All the evidence neatly organized, all the years of humiliation compressed into a story that could no longer be ignored. My finger hovered over the trackpad as I opened my email. My hands trembled as I typed out the recipients. Mom, Dad, Aunt Karen. Then, after a pause, I added my sister. The 4 people who had caused the most pain, the ones who had always told me I was too sensitive whenever they twisted the knife. I attached the letter. Then I hesitated. My finger hovered over the send button, and suddenly a flood of doubts rushed in. What if they laughed it off again? What if they twisted my words, said I was unstable, dramatic, just seeking attention? What if nothing changed at all? But then I thought of my aunt's words at the retirement party. Why are you even here? I thought of my parents' silence while everyone laughed. I thought of my sister pushing me down the stairs and the broken wrist that was brushed off like nothing. And just like that, the doubt faded. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. I took a deep breath, whispered, "This is for me," and clicked send. For a moment, the world stood still. My laptop made the soft whoosh sound of the email being sent, and suddenly it was out of my hands. The truth was no longer locked inside me. It was sitting in their inboxes. Undeniable. Unchangeable. I leaned back in my chair and let out a shaky laugh. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time, I felt powerful. I wasn't the quiet one in the corner anymore. I wasn't the easy target, the family joke, the one who swallowed her pain in silence. The rest of the day stretched out in front of me like an eternity. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted. A spam email, a delivery notification, a message from a coworker, but not from them. By noon, I couldn't take the waiting anymore. I went for a long walk, hoping the fresh air would calm my nerves. I kept imagining the moment they opened the email. My mom gasping, my dad's face turning red, my aunt scrambling to defend herself, my sister pretending she was innocent. I almost wished I could be a fly on the wall to see it all unfold. When I returned home, there were 3 missed calls on my phone. 1 from Mom, 2 from Dad. No voicemails, just missed calls. I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding. They had read it. They knew. For the rest of the evening, I ignored the phone. I cooked dinner slowly, savoring the quiet. Emily, my neighbor's daughter, who sometimes came by, had dropped off cookies earlier, and I ate one as if it was a small celebration. For once, I felt like I had claimed a little piece of justice. As I got ready for bed, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from my aunt. Just 4 words. "We need to talk." I smiled to myself as I turned off the light. No. This time, I decide when we talk. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly on the nightstand. My eyes shot open, heart hammering. It wasn't just a few missed notifications. It was a storm of calls and texts. My mom, dad, aunt, and even my sister were all trying to reach me at once. I picked up the phone, my hand shaking slightly. My mom's voice came through first, sharp and trembling, with a mix of anger and disbelief. "Why did you send that email? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I stayed calm. I had rehearsed this in my mind countless times. "Mom, I didn't do anything wrong. I told the truth. That's all." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear her breath, shallow and shaky, as if she didn't know how to respond. Then she said, "You think this is about telling the truth? You're just trying to humiliate us in front of everyone." I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. "No, Mom. This is about finally standing up for myself. And for once, maybe you should listen instead of yelling." She didn't respond. Instead, the line went silent for a moment before she hung up. I let out a long breath, feeling a mixture of relief and tension. Then the text started pouring in. My sister had sent a series of messages. "You're insane. Everyone hates you now. How could you do this to the family?" I scrolled past them, deliberately ignoring the rising panic in my chest. These were just words, not the truth. The truth had already been delivered. By mid-morning, the first attempt at reconciliation came, sort of. My aunt called, voice quivering, trying to sound calm. "Can we meet? I don't want things to get worse. Please?" I took my time replying. "We can meet, but I'm done being treated like a doormat. I want honesty, and I want respect." The rest of the day passed in a tense, strange limbo. Every time the phone buzzed, my heart leapt, but I didn't answer most calls. I let them stew in the uncertainty they had created for me over so many years. By evening, my parents showed up at my door unannounced. My dad's face was pale, his hands shaking slightly. "We need to talk. This email, it wasn't necessary," he said. I opened the door slowly, keeping my voice steady. "Necessary? Dad, you made it clear that nothing else would get through. I didn't want to humiliate you. I wanted to make sure you listened." They both looked at me, realizing that the quiet, submissive daughter they had underestimated for so long was gone. I could see it in their eyes. Confusion, fear, and maybe even a little regret. For the first time in years, I was in control. I wasn't reacting to their actions. I was leading the conversation. Every word I said mattered, and for once, I was the one who set the pace. By the time the evening ended, they left my house with promises that sounded hollow, but carried weight, because they now understood that things had shifted. I sat down on the couch, exhausted, yet exhilarated. The first wave of chaos had passed, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. They had been blindsided, yes, but the real work, the real confrontation, was yet to come. And this time, I wouldn't let fear dictate my actions. The next morning, I woke to a flurry of messages on my phone. My parents, aunt, and even my sister were all trying to reach me at once. Each text carried the same tone, pleading, defensive, desperate. "We never meant to hurt you." "It's just family dynamics. Please forgive us." "We can fix this if you just talk to us." I stared at the screen, my stomach tight. Part of me wanted to reply, to hear them out, but I knew better. For years, their apologies had been empty words, mere attempts to quiet my voice rather than address the real issues. This time, I would stay calm and in control. By late morning, my parents showed up at my door. I opened it slowly, heart steady. My dad's face was pale, eyes darting nervously. My mom clutched her purse as if it were a shield. We didn't know you'd go that far, my dad said, voice shaking. It's just family, you know? We didn't think. Think what? I interrupted softly, but firmly. That I wouldn't notice years of manipulation? That I'd stay quiet while you made decisions about me behind my back? That I'd let you disrespect me like this? They both flinched at my words. My mom opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. My sister appeared at the side, looking pale and guilty. We're sorry, she whispered, almost inaudible. I nodded slowly, keeping my voice steady. Sorry doesn't change the past. Sorry doesn't undo what's been done. And sorry doesn't give me back my power. If you want to make amends, you need to show it with actions, not words. They looked stunned. For the first time, I saw them realize that I wasn't the same person who used to bend to their will. I was confident, prepared, and unafraid. I let a brief silence hang in the air, letting my words sink in. Finally, I spoke again. I'm willing to give you a chance, but understand this. Trust has to be rebuilt, and boundaries have to be respected. From now on, I lead my own life, and you respect it, or you won't be part of it. My dad's shoulders slumped. My mom's lips trembled. My sister looked down at the floor. They knew this was serious. By the time they left, the atmosphere in my home felt lighter, almost peaceful. I realized that holding firm, standing my ground, and refusing to react impulsively had given me power they hadn't anticipated. I sat down, exhausted but resolute. The battle wasn't over, but now I knew I had the upper hand. And for the first time in years, I was the one setting the rules. It didn't take long for the consequences of my actions to reach them. By the next evening, my phone was buzzing again, but this time, it wasn't filled with empty apologies. It was the sound of panic and realization. My dad called first, voice tight and strained. We didn't expect you to go through with it. I warned you, I replied calmly, sipping my tea. I'm serious this time. No more manipulation, no more excuses. If you want to be part of my life, you have to respect my boundaries. My sister tried texting me next. Each message was frantic. This can't be happening. Please, let's fix this. I ignored it, knowing that desperation doesn't undo the damage. It only highlights the truth they had ignored for so long. By nightfall, I started hearing through mutual contacts that the family had been scrambling. Plans were disrupted, meetings canceled, and conversations filled with worry about how the situation had escalated. For years, they had assumed I would stay passive, that their small manipulations and belittling remarks wouldn't have consequences. They were quickly learning otherwise. I sat back in my chair, exhausted but satisfied. I realized that the power of calm, deliberate action was far more effective than yelling, crying, or begging. I had set boundaries, and now they were forced to face the reality of those boundaries. The sense of control was intoxicating, but more importantly, it was validating. For the first time, I truly felt seen, not for who they wanted me to be, but for who I actually was. My voice, my choices, my life mattered. The next morning, I received a formal email from my parents, stating they wanted to meet to discuss how to move forward. My heart raced, not with fear, but with confidence. I had already planned how that conversation would go, firm, fair, and without compromise on my dignity. It was clear now that the shock wasn't just in my actions, it was in the realization that I would no longer allow myself to be silenced. The family dynamic had shifted irreversibly, and they had no choice but to adjust or lose me entirely. For the first time in years, I slept soundly that night, knowing that I had taken control, protected my peace, and asserted my worth. And the best part? The real change had only just begun. The day finally came for the meeting my parents had requested. I arrived calm, composed, and fully aware of my own strength. My sister and parents were already there, faces pale, eyes darting nervously. "I'm here," I said simply, taking my seat. "We need to discuss how this family moves forward and the boundaries I expect to be respected from now on." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then my dad cleared his throat. We didn't realize how serious you were." I nodded slowly. "You didn't realize because you never truly listened. And I hope this serves as a reminder. I will no longer accept manipulation or disregard for my feelings or for my life choices." My sister started to interject, but I held up a hand. "No interruptions. We can speak respectfully, or we don't speak at all. The choice is yours." By the end of the meeting, they had no argument left. They apologized hesitantly, but sincerely, and promised to respect my boundaries moving forward. More importantly, they had seen that the power dynamics had shifted, and it was irreversible. Walking out of that house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The fear, the frustration, and the constant tension had been replaced by clarity and confidence. I had taken control without screaming, without revenge, simply by asserting my worth and acting decisively. Later that evening, my friends and even extended family reached out, expressing relief and admiration for the way I handled the situation. I realized that sometimes the most powerful action isn't confrontation, it's calm, deliberate, unshakable resolve. For the first time in decades, I felt proud of myself for setting boundaries and protecting my life. And the best part? The family had no choice but to respect me from now on. The shock had worked, and I had regained not just my peace, but my dignity.